Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with a companion piece to the top 10 list that we did about the top 10 most expensive cards not being reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. This video is going to be the top 10 list of most popular cards, most played cards in Modern that are not being reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. Again, for this list, we're going to use eligible cards that were able to be reprinted in Modern Masters 2017 but were not. So I'm not going to have cards that were reprinted from the Theros block onward on this list. We're just going to focus on particular cards that missed the reprint. That way we just know that they already have been spiking up in price, but they have even more opportunity to spike up in price, especially with the announcement today that the second wave of Modern Masters 2017 is quite substantial. So just for some transparency, I, as a small local game store, am able to get an additional 20. Our original order was only 24. So that's pretty huge. It's almost the amount that we were able to get last time. I don't have information from distributors yet, how many they have to sell, but I'm thinking that there will be somewhat of those boxes available, as well as all local game stores not claiming their 20 from Wizards. That's just going to go kind of into the pool for more people to get access to it. So we're going to expect I would say another 15 to 20% decrease in especially the more staple cards like the Tarmogoyfs, like the Damnations. Remember when I said Damnation was going to be an $8 rare? It's already down to 25. I still think people are holding on to that price memory. I just don't think there's enough demand for Damnation. In fact, if you go over and look at the most commonly played cards, Damnation isn't even in the top 100. So I think it's price memory. Price memory. It's going to keep that card up. It can't stay 25. So that's not what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about some of the ins and outs on Market Monday in a couple days. But right now I just wanted to finish the top 10 of the most popular cards played in Modern, not reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. So first of all, we're going to go over some honorable mentions. So these are the honorable mentions are the ones that are not eligible for printing, and then ones that just barely missed. So the ones that are not eligible printing but would make this list are Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize currently is the third most played card in Modern. Just because it is starting to get the nod over Inquisition. Thoughtseize can hit cards from Eldrazi where Inquisition cannot. Like you can rip out a Thought-Knot Seer or a Reality Smasher, as well as Bant Eldrazi, as well as like Scape Shift and Through the Breach. So a lot of people are preferring Thoughtseize over Inquisition. Also, Thoughtseize does pay the 2 life, so the number 1 deck right now is Death Shadow. They run both, but I mean, if they had to run one or the other, they would go Thoughtseize, as the 2 life does help their life total go down to then put the Death Shadows out. So Thoughtseize is still printed in Theros. It is skyrocketed up in value, currently going for, I believe, around $14, which I still think might be a little bit overinflated. Well, it's actually up to $15 now. We'll have to just wait and see with this card how far it can go. Theros is still, you can still get a box of Theros for like $80, $85. It really is the only thing that's worthwhile to pick up in Theros. So you gotta think in mind, if there's an $80 box and it's got a $15 rare, who knows when people are going to actually start opening some of this product. It's still very, very available. You can find it everywhere on eBay, and I think I can still get it from certain distributors. So another card I want to talk about, which is more recently printed, was Kolaghan's Command. Kolaghan's Command would actually break the top 20 in the most played cards in Modern. It does see play in sideboards like Death Shadow. It does see a lot of sideboard play and mainboard played in the various Jund builds and Grixis builds. Just a very, very good card. Gets more popular when the artifacts are needed to be taken care of. You can, especially Affinity, it's so back-breaking against Affinity. It's one of my favorite cards in Frontier, as it keeps the Insular Artifact decks in check, but we're not talking about Frontier for this particular episode. So Kolaghan's Command, I think, is due for a little bit of at least a nice trajectory upwards. It has seen some decent increases just because of the Frontier hype. Hopefully we can keep that going, because I absolutely love the format. Last but not least is Collective Brutality. It's another card that breaks the top 30. However, it is still in a standard printable set. It actually is an Eldritch Moon, which is very, very available still in distribution from Wizards. You can find these boxes for sub 80 on the internet. But Collective Brutality is still a $10 card. and is very, very played in the Abzan, in the Juns, and even in a bunch of decks you wouldn't even think it would be played in Modern. Just is so powerful. Anything that uses black usually wants Collective Brutality. Even Dredge, because it helps you get cards in the graveyard. Alright, so the ones that are just missed, these are cards that did not quite break the top 10 list, but were not far behind. One of them is Engineered Explosives. Engineered Explosives does better when the go wide strategies are a thing. Right now, go wide isn't that big of a deal. We're not seeing like a lot of Merfolk, a lot of those type of decks that try to flood the board with multiple threats. We're seeing all-in strategies like Eldrazi Tron and Death Shadow, where it's better just to have Path to Exiles and Fatal Pushes and just spot removal than cards like Engineered Explosives. But of course, if they ever do have like a go wide strategy, it's the go-to card for that, especially in multicolored decks. You can see this in Jeskai, Abzan, Grixis, tons of decks play it. Another one is surprisingly Spellskite. Spellskite is usually a staple card in the top 10. No infect at the moment, and not a lot of like combos you need to break up at the moment that Spellskite actually is good against. So I think it's fallen out of favor, which is, I guess, good news, because Spellskite is just a matter of time before it hits. It will skyrocket. It's when it's good, it's really good. We're talking about good enough to throw in the main of particular decks. So right now it's just in a few sideboard slots and a few decks. Again, it's just not the premier card to break up certain combos at the moment with these all-in type strategies that it just doesn't work against. Two cards that are very surprising that are not on the list is Kitchen Finks. Kitchen Finks has usually been the staple of staple uncommon creatures. However, at the moment I think that it's just the Collected Company decks are just not good enough to compete with these other type of strategies. And there is no burn, so a lot of sideboard slots like Abzan isn't running as many Kitchen Finks as they usually would because of the burn type strategies are nowhere to be found. Speaking of burn, Boros Charm would also usually be on this list when burn is heavy, but Boros Charm also did not make the cut. It's slightly off the top 10 eligible cards, but I think it definitely is a card. I'm surprised it was not reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. It did just get a Commander reprint, though. So there is that. So I guess we'll go on to our top 10 list. Starting off the top 10 is a card that has just jumped up in value substantially, insanely amount, due to the fact that both Living End and Death Shadow aggro are starting to see a lot more play. Death Shadow, of course, the #1 deck. Living End is up there. A few other decks will play this card, which is Street Wraith. Street Wraith has recently spiked up. There was a buyout. It went from a $2 card all the way up to a $6 card. The future sites are at $10. The foils are just going crazy. Future Sight foil is $47. Modern Masters is $10.50, the original Modern Masters. So this was a common out of Modern Masters and a common out of Future Sight. So I believe it's the most expensive common now in the set because it all depends. It depends on where Simeon Spirit Guide is. Like if you average the two out, then Street Wraith is, I think. But anyway, it's very expensive as a common. So I think that it's as long as Death Shadow and Living End are going to be a thing, this of course is going to be a go-to staple in both of those decks. I think you've missed the mark on investing in this card. It has nowhere to go but down. I think it will start to plateau off and go down. Is there enough demand to make this a $10 card? I am not sold on that. But I mean, Modern Masters 1 wasn't a heavy printing. Neither was Future Sight. So maybe in the scope of things, there's probably as many of these out in the existence as maybe as a rare in Kaladesh. So I mean, compare it to like Smuggler's Copters, for example. There might be more Smuggler's Copters out there than Street Race, which is crazy that a rarity can do that. All right, so on to number 9. The number 9 card is also in so many decks. This is a card that is keeping me back from really wanting to play the format. It's in such a variety of decks, which is breaking combos, and breaking more combos. Fast mana needs to go, but it's still legal at the moment, is Simeon Spirit Guide. Currently, Simeon Spirit Guide is sitting around $8. And even though there's probably more over, if you look at just the metagame, Street Wraith is more popular than Simeon Spirit Guide, but Simeon Spirit Guide is more diverse because it goes in more than 2 or 3 decks. It goes in an insane amount of decks. In fact, on Twitter, I tweeted out that I was trying to playtest a deck for Modern and lost to 5 different decks in a row using Simeon Spirit Guide. All of them 5 degenerate combo decks. I think the one was like a Living End, one was a Through the Breach, another one was the Breaking and Entering combo, another one was a Polymorph deck, and lastly, I think the other one was actually like a Scapeshift deck. It was, or no, that was Through the Breach that was trying to cheat out. Can't remember what the other last deck was. It was just trying to cheat out a combo earlier than it should. So Simeon Spirit Guide, I think this card will eventually be banned. There's tons of people, not just myself, that hate it. There's a lot. I think the only reason they don't ban it is they really want to keep Ad Nauseam a thing. And I would say Ad Nauseam is an interactive, unfun deck, but at least it's fair, as it takes a while to kill your opponent. Usually it's turn 4 or 5 by the time that Simeon Spirit, or by the time Ad Nauseam can really combo off, and usually a lot of times it's even turn 6 or turn 7. Usually it will always go off by turn 6 or turn 7, but 5 is kind of the staple for the Ad Nauseam, and I think that they don't want to ban it just because there's a lot of Ad Nauseam fans. But with the new Breaking and Entering out, with Pure Steel Paladin, with Goryo's Vengeance and Through the Breach decks, this card has to go. It leads to some insane turn 1 and turn 2 losses. If you haven't lost to Simeon Spirit Guide on turn 1 yet, I don't know if you've really played the format, because I've lost a lot of games to Goryo's Vengeance on turn 1 now to the Simeon Spirit Guides. I think I've even saw this deck in a storm list the other day, which is insane. So Simeon Spirit Guide, if they don't ban it, though, will continue to go up in value. Again, I don't know if this is the most expensive common, or if you can count Street Rate the most expensive when you average the two out. On to the number 8. Number 8 is kind of two cards, but I thought I'd put them in one slot, which is Rest in Peace and Relic of Progenitus. They are both have fallen out of favor a little bit more just because the graveyard strategies are not as big as they were. It still does help versus like even the Death Shadow, because the Death Shadow does try to utilize Traverse and Tarmogoyf, so Rest in Peace and Relic can kind of shut that down. So Rest in Peace was surprisingly not printed in Modern Masters 2017. They printed Grafdigger's Cage, and there just was probably not enough room for two Graveyard Hate cards. So Relic was recently reprinted in, Eternal Masters, I believe it was in. So the price of Relics are still pretty low. The price of Rest in Peace is shot up to $7 or $8. It is great when Dredge is huge. This has been the number 1 sideboard card in different various metas. I think that when Grixis get big, Tarmogoyf and Grixis get big, Rest in Peace is a great go-to card. So if you haven't reinvested, I think you've missed the mark in Rest in Peace. There was a huge buyout when that was statistically eliminated from Modern, but it's just got such a generic name that I highly, that's enough highlies, right? Caution people from investing in Rest in Peace. I would not be surprised that, especially since Mero said we have a method to our madness in one of his tweets, Rest in Peace could easily be in Amonkhet. They haven't had any Graveyard Hate for 2 sets. I would not be surprised if that was an inclusion in something like Amonkhet. Alright, on to number 7, which really could be a block of cards, but this one is particularly more valuable because it sees a little more play in decks like Lantern Control and Pure Steel Paladin, and this is Mox Opal. The main demand for Mox Opal is Affinity, and always will be Affinity, because Affinity has always been like a Tier 1 or Tier 1.5 strategy. And right now I think it's the second most popular deck in the format, and so you could put all the Affinity cards in here, from Springleaf Drum to Arcbound Ravager, in this Mox Opal, Glimmer Void. I've seen Glimmer Void being overtaken by the Spire from 8th Revolt. So anyway, all of those cards could be in this number 7 slot, but Mox Opal has a lot more diversity, and it is currently sitting at $65 and will continue to go up. This is the first card on our list that was reprinted in Modern Masters 2015, and a lot of these cards onward are in Modern Masters 2015, which I joke now that Modern Masters 2015 is which no one liked, is a better set, has a better estimated value by far than now Modern Masters 2017. So if anyone wants to trade a box of Modern Masters 2015 for a Modern Masters 2017, I will trade you straight up. But yeah, so I think that Mox Opal will continue to go up. It's another card that I think is on their watch list. It's fast mana, it leads to some degenerate broken things, but it's a little more narrow than Simeon Spirit Guide. So I personally am okay with Mox Opal, but other people are not, which I respect both opinions on this one. But this one could easily overtake the Tarmogoyf for the most expensive card in Modern, as it definitely has the demand to support the price increase. So I think Tarmogoyf will be under 65 within a couple weeks, and Mox Opal and a few other cards will overtake as the most expensive card in Modern. Enough talk about Mox Opal. Let's go on to number 6. Number 6, I think, is just getting a wave of... it's going in a lot of really, really peculiar decks just for the card draw. This one is Mishra's Bauble. Mishra's Bauble mainly sees play in Death Shadow. It is now an insanely expensive card. It spiked up to almost $60 at one point, but it is now down in value to about 36 is what the price of Mishra's Bauble is. Again, it's an uncommon in a very unpopular set, so I'm thinking that the rarity of the Mishra's Bauble is more like a mythic in today's day and age, and is a 4 of in the Death Shadows decks. It's a 4 of in a lot of decks that want to have the Delirium enabled, so a lot of Goyf decks will just chuck it in. I've even seen it in a lot of decks that just want an artifact to die. So yeah, there's a ton of those type of decks, or just as a filler card, because this is a 0 card that then gets you a card the next turn. So if you're not interested in a card your first turn, you just need a card later on, a card in your graveyard, card to recur, card to, I don't know. The Mishra's Bauble is perfect for that, and so it has spiked up. It's starting to flatline out at 36, but again, as long as Death Shadow remains in the #1 deck, this card is going to hold that value and could even increase. So crazy, crazy, crazy. If you can go through some bulk and find Cold Snap cards, this is definitely one of those cards you want to be looking for. Another card that has spiked up in price, which is in every Tron deck and a few other decks that like to find colorless. Actually, this is a common, isn't it? So this is the most, no, it's not quite the most expensive. It had a huge spike, but now looks like it's flatlined back down to $7, which is Ancient Stirrings. Ancient Stirrings is the best card for the Tron type cards because it does find you that Tron land. So you see it in a lot of the Eldrazi Tron lists, a lot of the Bant Eldrazi's, of course, just flat out Tron list. I've also seen this in other artifact-based decks that are just looking for specific artifacts. I've seen it in Lantern Control, for example. I've also seen it in decks that want just a specific land other than Tron. So Ancient Stirrings is going to continue to go up in value as long as those are very popular decks. I think the format for Modern right now, the reason why I'm not a fan of Modern is I think there's really two boogeyman decks. One is Death Shadow, which is just insanely fast and can pick apart your hand and then just beat you down with Tarmogoyf and Death Shadow. And the other is Tron. So if you want to compete against Death Shadow, you need to be able to fight the attrition war, and you need to be able to put out enough chump blockers or enough pressure to go toe-to-toe with the Death Shadow. On the flip side of that, though, is if you build a deck to beat Death Shadow, you're almost guaranteed to lose to the inevitable decks like Tron and Scapeshift. Both of those decks have a lot of... if you allow them to get to turn 4 or turn 5, you're going to lose. And I put Ad Nauseam in that category as well. So Scapeshift, Ad Nauseam, Tron. Those are the decks that just beat up the attrition-based decks like the Abzans and the Junts that typically would be very good against Death Shadow, just because they go a little bit bigger, go a little bit more value, and yeah. And then if you even take the other category in that, we have the all-in combo decks that are great versus these inevitable decks, as well as decent versus the Eldrazi, Tron, and Death Shadow. So it's kind of, we have a crazy, crazy time in Modern. I think it's an ABC format where those are the only options right now. Degenerate Combo, Inevitability, or Death Shadow, or another aggro deck that can just push through those two. So it's just a gross time in Modern. And Ancient Stirrings is one of those cards that's definitely enabling these inevitable decks for being contenders. So an Ancient Stirring should continue to go up as Tron is a very, very heavily played deck, and a few other decks that want this are in that category. On to number 4, speaking of a card that does very well against the Tron and the Eldrazi Tron and the Bant Eldrazi decks and just Tron in general, is Fullmaster Mage. Fullmaster Mage had a huge spike. It was included in Modern Masters 2015. And it is spiking like crazy at the moment. It is gone all the way up from $20 to $31. This is one of those cards that when it's good, it's really good. When it's not good, people forget about it. Fullmaster Mage destroys, breaks up the Tron. Tron may have to go back to like going to Crucible of Worlds just to combat the Fulminator Mage. I've seen some cool lists that are using Fulminator Mage in the new Liliana as just rinse and repeat for Fulminator Mage. Really, really cool decks. I have a deck tech coming up once I get my Damnations and Lilianas that I think is going to be really good. And Fulminator's a 4 of in the sideboard. This is the best way to combat the between Ghost Quarters and Fulminator Mage. You have a pretty decent game plan to combat the Tron type decks. So I think the Fulminator Mage is here to stay. Blood Moon hasn't been the greatest answer versus some of these because they just hold up mana to then destroy the Blood Moon, or they just have ways to generate mana to destroy the Blood Moon. So Fulminator Mage is just a better answer a lot of the times than Blood Moon to slow down your opponent and kind of get the pressure, the mid-range pressure that can have you push through before they get their Ugins or their degenerate cards that come out. So Fulminator Mage, I think, that has some room to grow, actually, which is surprising because it's at $31 and was reprinted in Modern Masters 2015. But I think that it could easily go up to 35 to 37 before it starts to flat run out. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Modern for the long term. I think it has major problems. I know these reprints are a great thing for Modern, but it's still not going to be enough, I think, because it just seems a lot of like the price has shifted now from the cards that are reprinted to the cards that were not reprinted. So there's still a huge introductory price to get into Modern. However, it's a lot better, especially the fetch lands going down substantially. But regardless of the price, we still have the problem with lack of vision and lack of like consistency in Modern with their bannings. Splinter Twin was not unbanned, for example, so what makes they still don't have what makes a card bannable and what makes a card not. I mean, I really think a lot of these decks are just as degenerate. So, and the whole reason why we don't have a lot of information is we just have a lot of tournaments being played. Maybe if we would have had a Pro Tour and a bunch of Grand Prix, maybe they'd have seen that like Death Shadow is the overwhelming part of the meta. Other than I think that Modern has a lot of diverse decks, but not really diverse in play style. Combo deck is a combo deck. If it's a degenerate combo deck, who cares what its win cons are if it's still utilizing the same outlets to get to the win condition, mainly Simeon Spirit Guide, for example. So I just would really like Wizards to relook at their format and exactly tell us what they want the format to be. And if it is degenerate, then they need to unban a bunch of stuff and just, everything goes type thing. If they don't want these crazy combos, they definitely need to look at a few cards and get rid of them. Anyway, enough talk about that. Now we're on to the really juicy stuff that was not reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. All of these should have substantial spikes in price. Number 3 is Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void, surprising, is this high up on the list. I think it's just the best way to combat Death Shadow. It takes care of so many cards. Thoughtseize, Inquisitions, Lightning Bolts, Death Shadow itself, Traverse the Uvenwald. If you get it out versus Death Shadow, it's very tough. They need to dig for their Ancient Grudge to kill your Chalice of the Void. So as long as like that, it's Death Shadow's the number 1 deck, or Affinity, and Affinity's like number 2, number 3, Chalice is going to be the best go-to hate card to combat it. And it is already at $65. We'll see Chalice continue to go up in value. It is a card that doesn't have a lot of printing because it's in Mirrodin, which was the first set available in Modern Masters, as well as Modern Masters 1. So yeah, it's currently around, $68. So it has had a little bit of increase since even the last time I checked it, $65. Currently, I think it's the second most valuable card next to Tarmogoyf, and should outclass Tarmogoyf within a few days, if not a week or two. So this desperately does need a reprint. Legacy wants it too. I'm surprised that Legacy, the Eternal Masters didn't have it, or it was an invention though. So that, I guess, will help a little bit on the price of Chalice of the Void. But yeah, pretty crazy that this is going to be the most expensive card when it's just a narrow hate card that can definitely be out of favor. You'll see Chalice of the Void completely disappear when certain decks are not the top decks. And you'll see cards like Rest in Peace have this slot, or Blood Moon, or the particular hate card that is good at the time. I've seen a lot of the Scapeshift decks, for example, put 4 of these in the main to combat Death Shadow, because really just these aggro decks, Burn and Death Shadow, are the only decks that are good enough to beat the inevitability of Scapeshift. So if you pack your main full of Chalices, there's a lot of decks you just hate out right there. All right, on to the number 2. This is actually my pick for going to be the most expensive card because I think it's the most consistent card. It just goes in a variety of decks, all the way from the Collected Company or the Eldritch Evolution decks, all the way down to the Bant Eldrazi decks, or any other deck that wants relatively fast mana, which is Noble Hierarch. Noble Hierarch currently is sitting around $65. I think it's just a matter of days before it hits the $70 range or even higher. It was just recently reprinted in Modern Masters 2, but Conflux does have a lot more printing than, say, Mirrodin does, but still not that much. It was still the time period of Magic where Magic was stagnant. So I think it's just a matter of time before Coco decks rotate back into the meta. The Eldritch Evolutions, the Bant Eldrazi might overtake Eldrazi Tron again for the go-to Eldrazi deck, and all of these want Noble Hierarchs. It's just a very consistent card for those type of strategies, and around the $62, $65 range, this has the most room to grow. Chalice, again, is just a flavor of the week card a lot of times, even though it does have the legacy pressure. Noble is about as staple of a card in Modern as they come. It's better than Birds in a lot of deck. Nightfall, it sees a lot of play in, for example, and even Zoo will use Noble Hierarch just because the Exalted is very, very good on this card. So I think this is my pick for most expensive card in Modern within the few next weeks. However, by far, the card that has the most playability, which has been on the #1 slot for all eternity, this is the card that is the staple. This is the format-defining card. The test is what they call it in Modern, the Doomblade of the Modern format. If it dies to this card, sometimes it's tough to play this card, especially if it has like a converted mana cost of 3 or higher. This is Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt did not get a Modern Masters 2017 reprint. In fact, it has not had a reprint since the Modern Masters 2015, and I don't know if it's in any of these like sets that are going to... I would not be too surprised if it was in... What's the next one that's coming out? Mind versus Might? It could definitely be in that. But its Lightning Bolt has had a bazillion reprints. That's why it still is pretty inexpensive. However, even the revised in the 4th edition prices have caught up to the $2 margin. That used to be if you wanted a white border Lightning Bolt, they were relatively less expensive. But now even the revised in the 4th edition are $225 or higher. And I think this card has to go up in value. We'll have that steady stream up. I don't know. They tend to reprint it before it has the opportunity to really crash the $3 price tag. I don't think this will ever see another standard set. It's just too good for standard. It could, of course, be in like the new Arch Enemy that's coming out, the new Mind versus Might. That's where it can get a reprint. Typically, they've been more of the uncommon slot lately, so it doesn't affect the price as much as it would if it was a common. But even Modern Masters 2 are already at like $3, and I think it's just a matter of time before the white border catch up to Lightning Bolt. So definitely keep your eye on Lightning Bolt. It has the potential. It's got the playability it's huge. Pauper loves it. Modern loves it. Casual players love it. It's a great introductory card. Burn is now affordable again with the Goblin Guide, so we're thinking that Burn, a lot of people are going to get into Burn. Of course, Death Shadow's a lot more affordable now with Tarmogoyf, and Death Shadows get reprint, and all the fetch lands get reprint. Lightning Bolt's a 4 of in that deck, etc., etc., etc. It's a very, very popular card in Modern. I'm surprised it didn't get the reprint in Modern Masters 2017, but it's something you can still find loads of them everywhere. So keep an eye on Lightning Bolt. I think it could... The white borders could crush the $3 mark. The black borders could crush the $4 mark within a year. However, last but not least, just my overall analysis of the Modern format, we saw prices spike up with Modern Masters 2015, and people thinking, oh my god, I'm going to get into all these decks, and it did not hold. Without a Pro Tour, without something for Wizards to really showcase the format, there is no reason for Modern to keep these inflated prices. We saw 2016 and the last part of 2015 actually see major losses in total format price of Modern. I don't expect Modern to do any differently in 2017. I think we'll get a lot of hype with the release of Modern Masters 2017. Then people will become burned out, and then we'll see a huge price decrease. The one thing that Modern has going for it is Standard is such a stale pile of garbage right now, and no one likes it. So it's a 2-deck format. It's frustrating to play Standard. So I think a lot of people are just gravitating over to Modern, especially with the new excitement for Modern Masters 2017. It'll have that going for it for a while, but then it will become an old stale format, I'm sure, as time goes on. We'll be back to this, people complaining about both Modern and Standard, and hopefully we get a resurgence in popularity for an alternative format. Because Modern, I think, is just on the power level that I don't like it. I like turn 5, turn 6 decks, lots of interaction, and I think unfortunately Modern is kind of, it's too hard to balance the format. It must be a nightmare for the Wizards ban, the R&D, whoever controls the ban and unbannings, just because there's just too many broken things, and more sets come out, it seems like it breaks even more stuff, and it's just a mess at the moment. So I'm still not sold on Modern. I think that after playing 5 decks in a row with Simeon Spirit Guide, it left a terrible taste in my mouth, and I might avoid it for a while. I had fun with the Rite of Passage combo deck, but again, I'm just sick of Simeon Spirit Guides. I'm sick of getting breaking and entering Eldrazi'd on turn 2. So crazy, that little Simeon Spirit Guide, breaking, entering, find Emrakul, find something else, you lose, blah, blah, blah. I think that you just have to hate it out. You have to play like Attrition, you have to play Thoughtseize and Inquisitions these days, and then it leaves you just wide open to Tron. Anyway, that's my overall analysis. I'll keep you updated with the kind of the Modern metagame and where there might be good opportunities to invest. But until then, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.